The Galactic Council had never seen humans like these. When the transmission from the frozen battlefield arrived, the assembly chamber fell silent. Across the holographic feed stood two figures, gray-bearded, eyes sharp as laser sights, armor worn not from neglect but from countless wars long past. They stood in the snow with rifles steady, frost gathering on their visors, and behind them, a small squad moved with perfect, wordless coordination. These were not the sleek, genetically enhanced soldiers the galaxy had grown to fear from humanity's newer generations. These were relics, veterans of an age when war was waged not with algorithms, but with grit. On the Council's viewing deck, Ambassador Threx of the Varnic Collective shifted uncomfortably in his shimmering robes. "They sent elders," he murmured, disbelief curling through his voice. "Surely a symbolic gesture. They cannot expect. They expect to win," interrupted Admiral Kale, the Council's human representative. His tone was calm, almost detached, but his eyes were alight with something untranslatable. "And you would do well not to underestimate them." Down on the ice planet of Varen 6, the cold gnawed through everything but the soldier's resolve. Sergeant Mason Hale, his beard now thick with frost, scanned the tree-line through his scope. Every breath came out as a cloud of vapor. To his left, Corporal Reeves, younger but still decades past standard combat retirement, adjusted the targeting uplink on his wrist. Their squad numbered only 8, all of them over 60. Old by any standard, ancient by military ones. And yet, they moved like a machine built on instinct and memory, each motion precise, each silence full of purpose. "They watching again?" Reeves asked, voice muffled through his helmet. "They always are," Mason replied. "Council can't believe ghosts can still fight." The enemy, an alliance of mercenaries under the Syndicate banner, had cornered the human relief convoy 3 days earlier. When standard troops failed to break through, Command deployed the Old Guard, a unit reactivated from deep reserve. Some said it was desperation. Others whispered it was a test, to prove that experience could still rival innovation. The wind picked up, carrying with it the distant hum of approaching drones. Mason signaled with 2 fingers, and the squad sank lower into the snowdrifts. They didn't rely on scanners or AI-assisted optics. They relied on the rhythm of sound, the pulse of wind, the faintest flicker of movement, things no program could quantify. A drone passed overhead. Reeves waited until it was nearly out of sight before whispering, "We're running low on charge cells." "Then make your shots count," Mason said. He didn't need to remind them what was at stake. The convoy carried survivors, civilians, wounded soldiers, data cores with critical intelligence. Losing it would mean losing the last foothold on Varen 6. The first firefight came sudden and brutal. Plasma bolts lit up the frozen dusk, striking the snow in violent bursts. Mason's team responded with a precision that bordered on artistry, controlled, minimal, devastating. Each burst from their rifles found a mark. Each motion was built from decades of repetition, reflex born of survival. As the last enemy dropped, Reeves exhaled slowly. "Still got it," he muttered, half to himself. "Still breathing," Mason said, scanning the horizon. "That's all that matters." The brief calm that followed was heavy with static. Mason tapped his comm link, connecting with Command. "Sector secured," he reported. A pause. Then the voice of Admiral Kale crackled through. "Council is watching. You're making them nervous." "Good," Mason replied, his voice steady. "They should be." Above, in orbit, the Council chamber buzzed with whispered debate. The Varnic delegate hissed, "These old humans fight like they were born for war." Kale allowed himself the faintest smile. "No," he said, "they fight because they were forged by it." And far below, as the storm deepened, Mason looked to the frozen horizon, knowing this was only the beginning. Night fell heavy on Varen 6, cloaking the valley in an icy haze that muffled sound and blurred light. The Old Guard had taken shelter within the wreck of an abandoned outpost, its walls fractured by years of frost and forgotten battles. Inside, The dim blue glow of a portable heater cast long shadows over their worn faces. They sat in silence, each man lost to his own thoughts, the air thick with the quiet understanding that this mission was more than just survival. It was legacy. Sergeant Mason Hale wiped the condensation from his visor and stared at the flickering map projected above the heater. The convoy was still 2 clicks out, pinned down between syndicate patrols and a collapsing glacier pass. Every minute they delayed risked lives. But charging blind into enemy territory without backup meant suicide. He weighed the options with the cold precision of someone who had already made peace with death many times before. Corporal Reeves leaned against a broken console, his hands trembling slightly as he reloaded his rifle. "They're hurting us," he said. "Syndicate knows we'll move for the convoy. They're setting a trap." Mason nodded. "Then we spring it on our terms." He rose slowly, stretching joints that ached from both the cold and time itself. Across the room, Sergeant Lyra Torres, a sniper whose calm presence anchored the team, looked up from cleaning her weapon. "Command won't send reinforcements," she said. "Council wants to see if the legends live up to the myth. Then we show them," Mason said, his tone quiet but unyielding. Outside, snow drifted past the shattered window like falling ash. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying faint mechanical whines, the sound of syndicate drones sweeping the perimeter. The team moved with practiced efficiency, gathering gear and checking comms. No speeches, no grand declarations. Just action. They'd all buried enough comrades to know that courage didn't need an audience. When they stepped into the open, the night swallowed them whole. Their suits blended with the snow, heat signatures muted by old-world tech that modern scanners ignored. The enemy relied on predictive algorithms and tactical AIs. Mason's unit relied on experience and instinct. They moved silently through the forest, their boots crunching softly in the frozen crust, until the faint glow of energy shields came into view. The syndicate camp sprawled across a ridge, guarded by automated turrets and mercenaries armed with plasma carbines. In the center, the convoy, 2 transports and a medical rig, was surrounded, its occupants huddled inside. Mason raised a hand, signaling halt. He studied the formation for a long moment, memorizing patterns in guard movement, turret rotation, drone flight. To most, it looked impregnable. To him, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Reeves, take left flank. Lyra, cover the ridge. I'll breach center with Cole," Mason whispered. "Keep it quiet until it can't be." The first move came like the snap of a frozen branch. Reeves disabled the outer sensors with an old electromagnetic pulse grenade, obsolete by Council standards, but still brutally effective. Lyra's rifle barked once, a single silent flash that dropped a guard before he could scream. Mason and Cole advanced, shadows in motion. When the alarm finally blared, it was too late. The old guard was already inside. The firefight that followed was short and savage. Plasma fire lit the snow in bursts of blue light, cutting through the dark like lightning. Mason's squad fought with mechanical precision, no hesitation, no panic. Each command was a heartbeat, each movement a memory of wars long past. When it ended, the camp was silent except for the hum of the transports powering up. Reeves leaned against a barricade, breathing hard. "Convoy's clear," he said, "but they'll be back." Mason looked toward the distant horizon, where the aurora shimmered faintly over the mountains. "Then we make sure they remember why humans still fight," he said. Above them, unseen by human eyes, the Galactic Council continued to watch. The convoy rolled out before dawn, engines muted, tires crunching softly over ice as the old guard formed a moving perimeter. Mason walked at the lead, rifle low, senses stretched thin, aware that victory had only sharpened the enemy's focus. Syndicate forces did not forgive losses, and they did not retreat without learning. Every step forward felt like an invitation to retaliation. Reeves fell in beside him, eyes scanning the tree line. "They'll try to pin us in the pass," he said. "Narrow ground, no room to maneuver. Which is why we won't go where they expect," Mason replied. He signaled the convoy to slow, then diverted them toward a ravine marked impassable on outdated maps. Experience had taught him that abandoned routes were often abandoned for reasons that no longer applied. From orbit, the Council's analysts murmured in confusion as human icons veered off predicted paths. Algorithms recalculated, threat models bloated with uncertainty. Admiral Kale watched in silence, recognizing the pattern where others saw chaos. The old guard was rewriting the battlefield by refusing to acknowledge its rules. The first counterattack came at midday. Syndicate gunships screamed out of the clouds, plasma cannons flaring as they strafed the ravine. Snow erupted in towering plumes, shockwaves rattling bones. Mason dropped to one knee, firing control bursts at the lead craft while Lyra painted targets from higher ground. The convoy scattered under his shouted commands, drivers trusting voices older than the machines guiding them. A gunship spiraled down, clipping the ravine wall before exploding in a bloom of fire and steam. Cheers never came. There was no time. Reeves dragged a wounded driver to cover, cursing through clenched teeth as blood darkened the snow. "I'm too old for this," he muttered, though his hands never stopped working. "So am I," Mason said, hauling him up. "Keep moving." The enemy adapted quickly, deploying ground units to flush the humans out. Drones swarmed low, sensors sweeping, weapons humming. Mason killed his suit's power feed and motioned the others to do the same. One by one, they vanished into stillness. The drones passed overhead, blind to men who knew how to become part of the terrain. When the ambush was sprung, it was devastating. Charges buried days earlier tore through syndicate ranks. Human rifle fire followed, disciplined and unforgiving. Enemy comms dissolved into panic, their formations collapsing under pressure they could not quantify. To them, the humans were everywhere and nowhere at once. By nightfall, the pass was littered with wreckage. The convoy emerged battered but intact. Medics worked under dim lights, saving lives that had been written off hours earlier. Mason leaned against a rock face, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. He felt every year then, every loss, every scar. Reeves joined him, offering a canteen. "Council's going to lose their minds," he said with a tired grin. "Let them," Mason replied. He looked back at his squad, at the survivors they had shepherded through hell. This isn't about impressing them. High above, the council chamber erupted into frantic debate as casualty reports streamed in. Projections shattered. Assumptions burned away. For the first time since the war began, the enemy was retreating not from superior firepower, but from something far more unsettling. Down in the ravine, Mason checked his rifle and turned toward the dark horizon. The war was changing, and he intended to see it through. He knew the coming battles would be harder, bloodier, and watched by an entire galaxy. But the old guard would advance anyway, carrying memory, resolve, and the weight of wars that refused to let them rest. The final engagement came without ceremony. Syndicate forces made one last attempt to break through the human line, committing everything they had left into a single, desperate assault. Mason felt it before the alarm sounded, a pressure in the air that years of combat had trained him to recognize. He stood at the ridge overlooking the valley, snow swirling around him as plasma fire lit the dark. "Positions," he ordered calmly, voice steady despite the chaos. The old guard moved as one, bodies aching yet unhesitating, every step taken with purpose earned over lifetimes of war. Reeves took cover beside Mason, breathing hard. "If this is it," he said, "I'm glad it's with you." Mason allowed himself a brief smile. "Still not done," he replied. The enemy surged forward, armored units advancing through fire and smoke, drones filling the sky like insects. Human rounds met them with brutal efficiency. Lyra's rifle cracked again and again, dropping targets with relentless precision. Cole dragged a wounded civilian to safety, shielding the body with his own without a second thought. From orbit, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Tactical projections collapsed into red warnings. What should have been a decisive syndicate victory dissolved into disarray as human resistance refused to break. Admiral Kale stood alone, hands clasped behind his back, knowing the lesson unfolding would echo for generations. The assault faltered, then shattered. Enemy lines buckled under pressure they could neither calculate nor withstand. When the final syndicate commander fell, the battlefield grew eerily quiet, broken only by wind and the distant crackle of burning wreckage. Mason lowered his rifle slowly. Around him, the old guard stood breathing in the cold air, shoulders sagging as adrenaline drained away. They had won, not through strength or speed, but through endurance and refusal. One by one, they checked on the wounded, human and alien alike, offering aid without discrimination. Hours later, as extraction ships descended, the Council convened an emergency session. Words like obsolete and primitive were erased from humanity's classification, replaced with colder, more cautious terminology. The delegates argued, but none could deny what the footage showed. Age had not weakened these soldiers. It had sharpened them. Mason listened as Kale's voice came through the comm. "The Council wants a statement," the Admiral said. "They want to understand how you did this." Mason glanced at his squad, at the lines etched deep into their faces. "Tell them," he said, "we remember what were costs." The message carried farther than weapons ever could. Across the galaxy, militaries adjusted doctrines, and enemies reconsidered their ambitions. Humanity's reputation shifted, not toward fear, but toward inevitability. As the old guard boarded the transport, Mason paused at the ramp and looked back at the valley. Snow fell gently now, covering scars left by battle. Reeves joined him, silent. "Think they'll call us again?" Reeves asked. Mason nodded once. "When things get bad enough," he said. The engines lifted them into the sky, leaving the frozen world behind. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had learned a truth it would not forget. Somewhere beyond the stars, enemies studied the recordings again and again, searching for equations to explain stubborn survival. They found none. What they saw instead were humans who refused to yield, who endured pain and loss, and who returned fire with memory sharpened into purpose. That understanding settled slowly, like fear, and it changed every future calculation. Across civilizations, that realization spread, quiet, irreversible, and profoundly unsettling for everyone involved. When humanity sent its oldest soldiers, it was not out of desperation, but warning.